Matthew said a little bit about demographics. So if you look at the number of people that are out of the closet atheists, that identify as atheists, that number is really small. But when you look at the number of people who don't believe in God, it's a much bigger number. It's a much bigger number. But people don't like the term. They shy away from the term. There's a lot of reasons for that. Atheists are the most despised people in America today. That is a fact. And it's easy for people to hide. It's easy to hide your atheism. But it's the wrong thing to do, because that's exactly what the religious bullies, bigots, and blowhards want us to do. Because that way they can keep trampling our rights with their boots of oppression that in their Bible they call peace and good news. Religion has ever been anti-human, anti-woman, anti-life, anti-peace, anti-reason, and anti-science. Those words come from Madeleine Murray. Today's her birthday. She was born in 1919, founded American Atheist, and was called the most hated woman in America. Why? Because she stood up for the Constitution. You'll hear some more quotes from her, and then judge. Was she right, or did she deserve that hate? The God idea, and these are her words again, has been detrimental not only to humankind, but to the earth. It is time now for reason, education, and science to take over. Those aren't hateful words. Most of those who try to push us down don't even know what we stand for or what we believe. Words from the Charter of American Atheists. Atheism may be defined as the mental attitude which unreservedly accepts the supremacy of reason and aims at establishing a lifestyle and ethical outlook verifiable by experience and the scientific method, independent of all arbitrary assumptions of authority and creeds. Nothing hateful about that, yet we're hated. As atheists, we're more interested in justice here and now rather than pie in the sky by and by. And we want to be regarded fairly and honestly and equal with anyone and everyone. You can hardly find a group that is more committed to complete equality than atheists, because we know what it's like to be hated. They say we don't respect their religion. What hypocrisy. H.L. Mencken, the sage of Baltimore, was an author, journalist, skeptic, and one of the snarkiest human beings on earth. And this is what he had to say about respecting religion. We must respect the other fellow's religion, but only in the sense and to the extent that we respect his theory that his wife is beautiful and his children smart. Religion's just an idea. And often it's a bad idea. Now, we live in a very raw political climate in this country where equality is an illusion. For some are more equal than others. Yet we're the ones in the best position to respect everyone's rights because we know what it's like to be disrespected simply for what you believe. The late, great Christopher Hitchens said this on women's rights. Today's also his birthday, 1949. I'm not particularly a feminist, but if you get women off the animal cycle of reproduction and give them some say in how many children they'll have, immediately the floor will rise. Well, when believers stop demanding respect for their beliefs while they mock others, the floor will rise. When others stop struggling against the facts of science or history, the floor will rise. When everyone uses science to understand how things work and stop making up stories about mud men, ribbed women, talking serpents, and magical fruit, the floor will rise.
Right.
When people feel silly and foolish because they're convinced by a feeling in a muscle that pumps blood, the floor will rise. When everyone realizes that love is greater than fear, the floor will rise. When we realize that there's more power in a single smile, in an expression of empathy or word of support than in all of the scriptures 10,000 times over, the floor will rise. When death threats and fatwas against atheists end, the floor will rise. And when religionists stop defaming with the words atheist, secular, and humanist, the floor will rise. I want to quote somebody else, not necessarily an atheist, a Republican, no less. Sandra Day O'Connor. And this was in a concurring opinion on Lynch versus Donnelly. The Establishment Clause prohibits government from making adherence to a religion relevant in any way to a person standing in the political community. When religionists realize they cannot claim a right to force their beliefs and their prayers on others, the floor will rise. When Muslims, Jews, and Christians stop imposing their twisted, misogynistic immorality on others, the floor will rise. When others stop falsely accusing atheists of immorality, the floor will rise. When everyone is equal before the law, the floor will rise. When it's safe for atheists to boldly claim their non-belief, the floor will rise. When atheists can run for office and win, the floor will rise. The people that rely on blind faith and superstition, they say we don't believe in anything. Well, they're wrong. Atheists believe in a great many things. I'm going to quote Madeline Murray again. An atheist believes that heaven is something for which we should work now, here on earth, and for all men to enjoy. An atheist believes he can get no help through prayer, but that he must find in himself the inner conviction and strength to meet life, to grapple with it, to subdue it, and enjoy it. An atheist believes that a hospital should be built instead of a church. An atheist believes that deed must be done instead of prayer said. An atheist strives for involvement in life and not escape into death. He wants disease conquered, poverty vanished, war eliminated. That all sounds really hateful, doesn't it? An atheist believes only in a knowledge of himself and a knowledge of his fellow man he can find in the understanding that will help to a life of fulfillment. When people feel silly giving God the credit for good fortune and excusing misfortune as God's will, I can't wrap my head around that. Well, the floor will rise. When people stop shifting blame and guilt to an imaginary Savior and take responsibility for their own actions, the floor will rise. When people realize they, acting alone and with others, have great power to move mountains without supernatural aid, the floor will rise. When people give up the notion that faith is superior to facts, the floor will rise. When believers stop claiming to know things they don't know, the floor will rise. When believers stop claiming they have the light of reason and logic on their side, when we all know they only have emotion and blind faith, the floor will rise. When believers stop using uninformed, and dishonest arguments against atheists and atheism, the floor will rise. John Morley said this: all religions die of one disease, that of being found out. Atheists don't have to attack religion. It's destroying itself from the inside out. We just have to sit back and watch while religion is weighed in the balance and found lacking. Christopher Hitchens said, I leave it to the faithful to burn each other's churches and mosques and synagogues, which they can always be relied upon to do. When we end repression carried out in the name of religious liberty, the floor will rise. When we uphold every individual's right to self-determination, the floor will rise. When believers stop rationalizing and justifying and start doing something about misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and atheophobia, the floor will rise. When believers stop using God's will as an excuse for abuse and neglect of children, the floor will rise. When everyone has the right to marry someone they love, the floor will rise. When believers try to understand why atheists are angry, and atheists have fewer reasons to be angry, the floor will rise. When believers understand their scriptures as well as atheists, and they stop rewriting, editing to fit their own subjective, relativistic, personal beliefs and preferences, the floor will rise. When laws privileging one religion are repealed everywhere, the floor will rise. I'm going to stop a minute. We have a problem in this state with a theocratic government. And I'm not just talking about laws that are being passed because of religious motives. I'm talking about laws that are already on the books. In Alabama, religious daycare centers are completely unregulated. Children can be kept in the most squalid conditions, and children have died. And when called on it, the Christian Coalition of Alabama made excuses. They made excuses. They didn't make improvements. They didn't voluntarily get daycares to step up. They made excuses. Why? Because they believe they're above the law. They're not. We've got to start holding them accountable. When everyone, everywhere, can rely on science and medicine for health care, the floor will rise. When we all agree facts are facts, an allowance can be made for opinions and preferences, but without coercion or force, the floor will rise. When believers stop exploiting grief and tragedy to promote their superstitions, the floor will rise. When believers stop projecting their hate, despair, and suffering on others, the floor will rise. When raw violence, pain, and humiliation are no longer called godly discipline, the floor will rise. And they say we want to take away their faith. Well, I don't care who or what they believe in. I just want them to stop trying to use their religion to make policy and laws for the rest of us. So what do we want? To paraphrase Madeleine Murray, we want an ethical way of life. We believe that we cannot rely on a God or channel action into prayer, nor hope for an end of troubles in a hereafter. We believe that we are our brother's keepers and are keepers of our own lives. That we are responsible persons and the job is here and the time is now. We want our government officials to return to the rule of law based on our Constitution. When all humans are treated humanely, the floor will rise. When parents stop terrorizing their children with everlasting torment for transient and minor transgressions, the floor will rise. When priests stop victim blaming and shaming children because the priest lacks sexual restraint, the floor will rise. When no one is willing to tell a rape victim that it's God's will, the floor will rise. When everyone is bold enough and confident enough to teach children how to think, not what to think, the floor will rise. When blasphemy laws are repealed everywhere, the floor will rise. When we stop regarding religion as a factor in selecting friends and partners, because frankly, religion should become irrelevant, the floor will rise. When we stop segregating, polarizing, and fighting over religion, the floor will rise. And when we're all equal, the floor will rise. That's my time.